Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for attending today's latest Incubeta seminar. My name is James Sleaford. I'm the UK Managing Director of Incubeta's AdTech measurement and consultancy teams, and I'll be guiding you to today's session. We've got some great speakers and a panel ahead. As you can probably imagine, conversations around privacy, the regulation changes brought on by various legislative institutions, the response of ad tech platforms to these changes, and the fears of actually what it means to marketers are very regular conversations that we're having, a daily feature of our work with clients, ad tech partners, and also in supporting the media and creative teams who are internally at Incubeta. There's a lot of uncertainty around the conversation. It is an ever-changing landscape, and I think it's important to start by acknowledging the fact that the rules of the game are constantly changing. I wasn't expecting to go on holiday a few weeks ago and then come back to find that Google had delayed their deprecation plans for a further year, but that is the landscape that we're working in. It's constantly changing, and as human beings we all tend to fear uncertainty most of all, so it's no surprising that privacy ranks incredibly highly in all the CMO's biggest focus surveys that we read in industry press throughout the year. But looking in today's session, I don't think we should just look at privacy through the prism of fear and uncertainty or see it as a dry topic. It is very exciting. You know, Netflix are making films about privacy, which I'm sure most of us have probably seen. Apple are making great adverts about it as well. And for those in the UK, many of you will have seen BBC interviewing Sundar Pichai for an hour in a primetime TV slot last week. So there's a lot of positive, exciting things to think about when we're talking about privacy. And I do see some great opportunities for brands to use these changes to build better relationships with their customers and for us all to do more exciting work. So with that kind of positive approach and mentality, I'd like to say we've got an amazing session in store for you today, and hopefully it will enable you to get a deeper understanding of the privacy landscape and hopefully give you a few takeaways to take back into your world of work. But before I introduce our brilliant speakers, I'll run through a few housekeeping bits. Those that haven't been on one of our webinars before, there is a chat function on the side, so feel free to get involved, leave us a question, say hi. This webinar will be recorded, so this is currently 3 o'clock British summer time, so if you're watching at another time, this will be a recording. However, please do still leave us your questions. We will get back to you in the chat rather than live in person, and today we should be running for about an hour or so. So looking forward to the agenda, we've got two great speakers. Zoe Hall, first and foremost, from Incubeta, will be taking us through Incubeta's view on privacy, and we're very excited to welcome Zach Farque from one of our valued partners, OneTrust, who will take you through their perspective on privacy and tell you a little bit more about their tools. Finally, we'll have a panel. We'll bring both Zoe and Zach back online to have a chat, and we've got some questions ready to go, but feel free to engage and ping your questions over in the chat function, and we'll also be welcoming Damien Bennett from Incubeta back in for that session as well. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. Zoe Hall is Managing Director of AdTech and Measurement Solutions based in New York. Zoe has been with us for over 8 months and has been a driving force to some of the biggest growth in the privacy space for us here at Incubeta. So I will hand over to Zoe now and take it away.
Thanks very much, James. Great. So as James mentioned, privacy really has come to the forefront of our industry. And as he also noted, there is a lot of uncertainty and hesitation and fear, and kind of importantly, an assumption that this shift is predominantly a complex tech issue, which it is not. We all work in a very fast-paced industry where agility and innovation are not only required, but rewarded. brands, agencies, publishers alike need to constantly evolve the tactics, the applications of data, the MarTech tools they rely on, and their internal operational structures even. So adapting to these recent privacy initiatives and learning how to continue to deliver effective digital marketing is simply, in my mind, the newest shift in our ecosystem. And just like all other ecosystem changes, one that will continue to evolve. So while this certainly does present a challenge, I also believe, like James does, that it presents an equal or greater opportunity. When you boil it down, privacy really is about consumer trust. So increases in user tracking alongside news events about data breaches or misuse of data has really escalated consumer concerns about how their personal data is being leveraged and used and shared. And this concern is repeatedly being displayed across the various ways that consumers communicate with us or behave across digital properties. So for instance, 25 million people downloaded Telegram when WhatsApp updated its user privacy policy. Or 87% of consumers have said that they believe privacy is a human right on an eMarketer report. So on the plus side, while there are these issues, many studies have also displayed that users are willing to share their data and do see the value in sharing or exchanging information when they get a service. So largely what we're pointing to here is a lack of consent, a lack of transparency, and an opinion that there's a sort of one-sided benefit or profit model in place. So in accordance with these rising consumer expectations and concerns, governments and big tech are responding in kind. So this is resulting in additional and rapidly evolving regulation and restrictions on cookies, on devices, and on cross-web and app identifiers. So governments have now made it so that regulation has to be opt-in versus opt-out, and tech companies have followed suit by removing third-party cookies in search of safer alternatives. So this changing landscape and expectations has also obviously had a significant impact on our industry. So most evidently, we've seen this with GDPR in Europe, CCPA in California, or POPI in South Africa. But in fact, there are 128 countries that have enacted some new form of opt-in data privacy regulation. Following the changes to iOS, we're also starting to be able to measure the impact. So we're now only seeing about 11% of consumers opting in to cross-app tracking on iOS 14.5. And finally, we have the Rubicon project, very terrifyingly telling us that these aforementioned changes could result in about a 60% reduction in the efficacy of data-driven marketing. So while we all need to think about and obviously very urgently address what these changes mean for us and for our industry, I definitely do not believe that privacy measures need to be adverse to performance or that they're inversely corollary or incompatible, as we're hearing a lot. There are, however, 4 areas where marketers definitely are going to see the most material impact. So first, first-party data solutions and infrastructure is going to become increasingly more and more critical. Second, measurement models, which have typically relied on observed or recorded behavior, are going to have to move to a more modeled format with an increased reliance on ML, AI, and aggregation. There are also going to be some limitations on targeting options, such as frequency capping, and marketers will also find that their ability to personalize user experience becomes increasingly limited. So now that we have all this context, what happens? What are we required to change? What is the way forward? Unfortunately, there's no panacea and there's no one-size-fits-all approach. I've seen giant companies that are data poor and tiny companies that are data rich. It really depends on your architecture and how you are operating currently. So there are a number of prospective solutions being worked on. One of the most notable is Google's solution to replace current cookie targeting. So cookies help with interest-based ads, remarketing, anti-fraud, conversion measurement, and reach measurement. What they're hoping to do is a series of initiatives that are aimed at ensuring a more optimized privacy experience or environment, but one that still meets performance measures and standards. So they've introduced Flock for interest-based ads, Fledge for remarketing, Trust Token for anti-fraud, event-level reporting for conversion measurement, and aggregate reporting for reach measurement. While a lot of these changes will sort of be built into your media platforms and tools, I really can't stress enough the importance of ensuring that you have proper site and app-wide tracking and that you're looking to measurement platforms that will help you to build in more of this modeled performance data. So an example of this would be Google Analytics 4. In our vantage point or viewpoint, we think marketers need to learn to actually be customer-centric. So while customer centricity is not really a new topic, the connotation or the previous underpinning was that having this 360-degree or more holistic view was desirable for enhancing the success or the profitability of the brand. I think the opportunity that we have now as brands is to build on existing and new client relationships, but in a way that's more mutual and much more transparent. So in shifting to building out a strategy that enhances the quality of your first-party data, you can also connect more with your consumers. And again, can't stress it enough. First-party data is definitely your most significant asset in this cookieless world that we're headed into. So being customer-centric, what does that mean? It basically means listening to and getting a clear picture of what are your customers' concerns and how can you respond to them. So providing clarity on what data is being collected, how it's going to be used, and what the user gets in return or exchange. We believe that digital responsibility is critical to the success of all businesses, and improved data regulation is a much needed opportunity to reset and provide data solutions that are more effective for your consumers and your companies. So how do we do that? There are three predominant ways to do this. The first is by doing what's right for the customer and being truly customer-centric. The second, there's definitely never been a better opportunity for marketers to look at their current data strategy and regroup or rebuild. If we're being honest, most of the clients, brands, et cetera, we see know that there are limitations to their current setup, and this is the perfect opportunity and platform to strengthen the foundations of what you're collecting and how you're activating. And finally, there does need to be a clear value exchange. So somewhat of a give and a take, data in exchange for a service or some sort of customized experience. So when you talk to customers, you find out what they really want is two things. First is they want a choice over whether they share their data, and also equally an easy way to retract that access. So consistency and actually requiring consent is key. And the second is they want to know what their data is being used for, how it's collected, how it's activated on. So this means emphasizing transparency. When we talk about regrouping or rebuilding, what we mean is asking yourself the hard questions, challenging yourself on how effective your current data strategy is. So how are you collecting data? Are you collecting all the information that you could possibly be collecting? Are you collecting data that you should not be collecting because it's not tied to a business objective or use case? How are you storing that data? Is it safe? Is it robust enough? How are you organizing it? Can you quickly access it? Is it usable? And finally, are you connecting it to your media and creative? How are you activating the data that you're collecting? So since we've established that opt-in first-party data and brand CRM lists are definitely the most direct and future-proof way that a brand can connect with consumers and also unlock those insights to help drive future engagement and targeting, we need to be thinking about the initiatives that we can create for consumers to see a fair value exchange. So this could be as simple as offering the consumer a better experience. We know that they value personalized experience or unique content. It might mean going back to the days of reward schemes or loyalty programs, or offering better fulfillment options if data is shared, or even giving exclusive offers or content to customers that do share their data with you. Oh, sorry. The tricky part here is that this isn't possible unless silos within business units are kind of debunked. So we have to work together. There are so many different stakeholders across and within organizations, and we all need to get a bit better at working together to drive this change forward, because it's not just a tech problem or just a marketing problem. It spans across the board. And finally, I think what's really important is that we have to remember this is much bigger than just marketing or digital marketing. Data is such a critical asset and a force for good in the world. It can be used to solve some of the biggest challenges, from climate change to healthcare to education. And so I think it's our responsibility to play a part in rebuilding consumer confidence and helping them to understand why data is shared and what we do with it, and bringing back some of that confidence that customers used to have, which is no longer blind confidence. And I think the only way that we can do this is if we really listen to the consumers and come forward with a safer, fairer, and more effective use of their data. So thank you for listening to our privacy talk. James, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you very much, Zoe. Always brilliant to hear you speak. That's fantastic. I really love the way you brought it back around to the real world at the end there, and completely understand what you're saying about the impact of data and people's concerns around data, around test and trace and so on that we have in various parts of the world at the moment. So thank you for that. Looking forward to asking you a few more questions, particularly on the modelling ideas for further down the line when we get on the panel. So we'll be welcoming you back onto the stage shortly.
Perfect. I'll see you then.
Cheers. Brilliant. Loving seeing a few images flying up there. Congratulating Zoe. Thank you very much. We are now moving on to Zach Farouk. So Zach is joining us today to talk about OneTrust and OneTrust preference choice. Zach, are you able to join now?
I am indeed. Can you hear me, James?
Excellent. Yes, we can hear you. Just checking that you're all okay. So we're absolutely thrilled to be joined by Zach. OneTrust is the #1 most widely used privacy, security, and marketing user experience technology platform. And Zach, I believe you're going to be telling us a bit more about why trust is so important in the privacy world, and you advise companies large and small on best practices to drive engaging user experiences and building trust. So very excited to hear what you have to say. I'll hand over to you now.
Brill. Thank you for having me, first of all, James. And Zoe, I think I should just be a big slide that says I concur. Fantastic presentation, and totally agree with everything you've gone through there. What I wanted to go through today was really just a view from OneTrust's side of the table of what we're seeing, both talking with analysts, partners, clients, prospects. So wanted to share that with you all today. As James mentioned, my name's Zach Farouk. I'm an offering analyst here at OneTrust. That probably doesn't really tell you much about what I do, though. I work across all of our different functions in our strategy department, but focus specifically on 3 of our products. That's consent and preference management, which includes data capture, as well as policy and notices for things like terms and conditions and privacy policies. So thank you for having me here today. Just a very quick bit of independent validation, if I may, for those of you that aren't aware of OneTrust more broadly, or more specifically the OneTrust preference choice offering. OneTrust supports companies ultimately operationalizing trust. So whether you're a procurement team looking for third-party risk management solutions, a privacy team looking for data mapping and assessment automation, or a marketer looking for solutions at customer touchpoints and customer experience pieces, whether that's consent preferences or data capture, then we have solutions that support you. So great to be awarded the highest designation of strong positive from Cooper & Chacol, and from a CMP perspective or a cookie banner perspective, we have the largest market share in the world today. Enough about OneTrust, though. Let's move on to the lay of the land. And James, you mentioned this earlier, Apple and their privacy adverts. I don't know if everyone's seen it. I know certainly in the UK, alongside the mobile operators, they've been very prolific with their advertising. But really just calling out here that trust is a competitive differentiator for businesses today. It's been said many times, and we see it with the adverts with Apple, that the iPhone, the iPad, the iPod, the Mac, none of those are Apple's best products. Their best product is privacy, which is pretty incredible. Why is it such a competitive differentiator, though, today? Well, ultimately, it's because consumer expectations have changed. This is what makes a difference. This is what makes a market. Us as consumers, who we choose to partner with, as the brands that we purchase from. But that's different. We're more aware because of privacy regulations. Of course we are. The behemoth that was GDPR, probably our first interaction was even before that, the e-privacy directive, or more colloquially known as the cookies law for those in Europe. But then the behemoth that was GDPR and the avalanche of regulations that have come in since. The big difference with all of these regulations now is that they have legislated fines. And so what we're seeing are fines go into the media, data breaches. There's much more awareness there. And as Zoe mentioned earlier as well, obviously big tech are taking this even further than the regulations. Third-party cookie deprecation is not a regulatory requirement. It's not been required by the GDPR or CCPA or LGPD or any other four-letter acronym that I'm pretty sure there's a regulation out there at this point. They're doing it to protect their consumers' privacy. Same with Apple, the iOS 14 changes, the consent to the identifier for advertisers, very similar impact in the mobile space to third-party cookies in the web space. And I talked about the media coverage that we're seeing in the press, not just from the fines perspective, but we're also seeing Hollywood getting involved. So things like The Social Dilemma on Netflix, I don't know if everyone has seen that, would highly recommend if you haven't, but just making us all much more aware of, as consumers, of our digital footprint, the data that's being captured, how that data is being monetized. It's really opened our eyes over the last few years. And so ultimately, what we're seeing, certainly at the board level, if we go back to the 80s, early 90s, it was all about price and quality. How much bang am I getting for my buck? Then moving into the sort of later 90s, into the 2000s, customer experience, customer engagement became that icing on the cake. And we saw KPIs like Net Promoter Score, customer effort score, customer satisfaction scores coming to the forefront. The ability to sit on my sofa at home in the morning, order something online and have it arrive in the evening, all of that driving this experience and engagement piece. And so all of those things are still important. We still care as consumers about quality, price, engagement, experience, but we're also now much more aware of the brands we work with from a trust and probably most importantly, a transparency perspective, because you can only build that trust through transparency. A lovely stat here by Edelman that I'm sure no one will disagree with, though please do feel free to put it in the chat if you do, that 70% of us say trusting a brand is more important today than in the past. And I'm sure we can all agree that we expect that to increase as time goes on. So what I wanted to touch on, because this is something that we're seeing more and more, a lot of this down to being increased or expedited by the deprecation of third-party cookies. But why should you consider as a brand to really think about your first-party data strategy and move closer and closer to that first-party data strategy? And I think the best way I can explain this is with a little anecdote, a scenario that I experienced myself last year, of taking a different approach to interacting with our customers in the digital ecosystem. So it was about November last year that we'd got through the first wave of COVID, being locked down together, me and my girlfriend at the time, and I decided what I wanted to do was ask her to marry me. Now, in a non-COVID world, what I would have done was say, I'm off to the gym, or I'm going to play golf. And then I'd have gone to the nearest jewelers and I'd have started my search for that perfect ring. But that wasn't open to me because everything was shut down. The only avenue I had was to go online. But I've got a background both working with ad tech, but also as a web developer previously myself. So I understood how third-party cookies worked and the ad tech ecosystem. And I was super concerned because I thought the minute I go online, the minute I search for engagement rings, the minute I visit a brand's website, she's going to come home from work, or a day later, 2 days later, she's going to be spammed with adverts for engagement rings, ruining one of the biggest surprises, or what we hope is one of the biggest and best surprises of our life. And I thought, this is crazy. The very brands that want my custom are disincentivizing me to visit their websites because of how they're treating my data and my online privacy. Now, of course, I had no choice. I had to do it. So all of the usual stuff, incognito onto a VPN, go in. First thing you do, check the cookie banner, +1 if it was a OneTrust cookie banner, of course. But then, you know, even more depth, I was going through each and every cookie. But that experience could have been so much better, because all I was being seen as by those brands at that point in time was an IP address. I was just a number. And if I was ever to walk into one of their bricks and mortars stores, I would never be treated like that. I would be treated like a human being and a customer. But in the digital ecosystem, because technology has run away with us, we've taken the easy route and stopped thinking about consumers as human beings at the other end of the computer. And what I would have loved to have seen, the opportunity that one of those brands could have had, was I turn up on their website, Instead of instantly being trying to get my consent to track me and send me adverts further down the line, what they could have said was, are you looking for an engagement ring today? Or are you looking for a surprise gift? It doesn't even need to be an engagement ring. And I could have hit yes. And then they could have said, don't worry, your secret's safe with us. But what we would like to do is get in touch with you with offers on some of the products that maybe that you look at, or discounts and rewards that we have going on for engagement rings. And they could have given me a box to enter my email address. Now, that second, I would have instantly put in my email address and accepted that. And within, 15, 20 seconds of interacting with that brand, a handshake would have happened. And the start of what would hopefully be a very long-term relationship between brand and consumer, that it is a direct relationship that's mutually beneficial. Not a single brand took the opportunity to do that. But I think that's one of the best examples that I can give in a real world scenario, obviously, because something I encountered in regards to the importance of first party data strategies. Can you imagine the size of their customer database that they would have if they employed that strategy? So really important to think about it from a customer perspective, as Zoe was mentioning earlier. And I do wonder how many Christmases were ruined last year. Everyone knew what they were getting for Christmas because they were suddenly seeing ads for Lego or for whatever brand that their other half had been looking at to purchase gifts or for your kids. So away from the anecdote, I digress. Ultimately, what we're talking here is about a challenge with data, because advertising, marketing, sales, all these activities rely on personal data. Now, if we think about data, or in its essence, let's just think about an email address, my email address. Maybe as a brand, I want to share that with third parties. And it could be for monetization reasons, but it could also be just to improve the experience for the consumer. Maybe I've purchased a car and I need car insurance. Or maybe I've purchased tickets to go and see an event. And so I'm looking for somewhere to stay afterwards. So there are complementary services that maybe I don't offer, but are important to consumers that purchase those products as well. I might want to use it for personalization. When we think about preference management, personalization of communications or content. Personalizing the content on the brand website for engagement products and engagement rings would have helped me search through the wheat and the chaff of the products if they'd have captured that information up front. We might want to use it for business intelligence purposes, understanding our consumers, what demographics, what audiences, and we might also use it for functional purposes. But all of these different purposes ultimately have a regulatory impact. We need a lawful basis under EU GDPR specifically to process this data in this way. And so sometimes we're going to be reliant on consent. Sometimes maybe it is just legitimate interest and we don't need any wider consent. But what's imperative is that we are transparent with our consumers, with our end users, with our customers in how we're using that data and why we're collecting it. Because if we are transparent, then those customers are more than happy to provide that information. And so what is often seen as this dichotomy of privacy versus marketing or privacy versus personalization really isn't. They go hand in hand. This is an opportunity to right the ship, to start seeing consumers as consumers on the digital ecosystem in the same way that we would up front. And a lovely stat here from Accenture in regards to how willing we are to show our info or to provide our information when brands are transparent about it. Now, what is the reality of this at the moment for most brands? Well, the reality is we probably have lots and lots of data, but we don't really know where that data is coming in from. Our customers are touching us on loads of different touch points. They may be coming to multiple brands' websites. They're of course accepting cookies, but maybe they're calling up the support center or contact center. Maybe we have mobile apps that they're interacting with. Maybe we're pulling data as well from third parties. And so we have all of this information that needs to go into this huge technology stack that's sitting behind as well. And we don't actually know if we can potentially share that data. Are we even allowed to store that data? Is it compliant? And if we don't know that, then our customers and consumers certainly don't. The people's whose data that ultimately is. So when you start thinking about and moving towards a first-party data strategy, it's important that you think about the entire experience, every touch point of that privacy experience. Because if you do that well, consumers won't be submitting data subject access requests. There won't be a request to delete data or for access to the information. Because ultimately consumers are only doing that when there's been a breakdown in trust. We've got something wrong earlier on at one of these touch points. So it's really important to think about all of the touch points and that entire experience. And so, of course, I will show you an example with OneTrust preference choice. But really the point here is, if you get your data in clean and you get your data in a compliant manner, then you're not spending huge amounts of money on the back end trying to clean up that data, trying to dedupe that data, trying to understand if you can even use that data. If you have a new campaign that you're wanting to run, can I process this personal information for that campaign? Do I have permission to do that, either via legitimate interest or via consent? So if you can sort out the problem at the front end, ensure that it is clean data coming in a transparent manner, then you can save yourself a hell of a lot of pain and hurt and money on the back end. And that's everything from me. Thank you very much. Back to you, James.
Thank you very much, Zach. That was brilliant. I think we're going to keep you on stage now. Now, I'm assuming we got a happy ending to that story.
Yes, sorry, apologies. I didn't want to give away the spoiler too soon. I wanted everyone staying to the end. We didn't want everyone leaving till the Q&A. She did say yes. I think if she hadn't, then I'd have been too hurt to ever tell the story. So,
well,
thankfully she did.
Congratulations. That was an amazing presentation, Zach. Thank you so much. A few kind of key bits that I called out there. I really loved your kind of analogy of, looking at, people as customers rather than cookies when they walk through the door on that side of things. And I think at the end there, just the real kind of, sometimes we get caught up in the privacy challenge as a media and retargeting challenge, but actually it's understanding the holistic view of privacy across the organisation. So thanks very much for that. We'll welcome on stage now as well, Damien. Damien Bennett is our Global Director of Growth and Product. So thank you very much for joining us today, Damien. We've got a few questions already prepared on our side, but I'd encourage everybody that's watching to pluck up the same amount of courage that Zach did. Go over to the box on the right hand side and type in a question, and we'll come round to those. To kick off first, I mean, Zach, I think you've probably answered some of the question already, really, but I was going to start off with what are the biggest mistakes you're seeing businesses make with regard to privacy?
I think the biggest mistake is just not considering it as a customer touch point or part of the customer experience. I think for a lot of customer facing functions, marketing, sales, commonly their only interaction with privacy is a 1-hour e-learning course that's been mandated by the DPO. And that's just the completely wrong way to look at it. It's been seen as a pain rather than an opportunity as a competitive differentiator. So I think, probably the biggest mistake is just not getting involved, not having the knowledge to be able to make a difference and improve the experience for your consumers. Cool.
Thank you very much. And I think, from both the consumer, I suppose we see things differently, both from a consumer and an in the industry perspective, right? So it's amazing what we do get to see. Damien, Zoe, is there anything else that you would add, or you're seeing from mistakes that businesses are potentially making around privacy?
Yeah, I can go if you don't mind, Damien. I loved that Zach had the mapping, because I think what's happening is everybody is waiting to see how other brands react or what the other strategies employed are. And as we talked about, there really isn't a one-stop shop solution for this. You kind of just have to dig into your data, all of your marketing and sales tools, all of your different touch points, map them out, figure out the pre and post sales cycle. Where are you leveraging those cookies? And are you going to be able to continue to do so? And once you have that mapping, I think the benefit to starting right now is that you have time to compare. So you can apportion part of your budget to testing these new frameworks that are more privacy safe against your existing cookie tactics, and find the ones that are working for you. So you can have this time to figure out what is a better process, what is a way that I can set up my tracking and my activations in a durable fashion while you still have access to the tactics that are driving your engagement and your performance right now.
So almost start building the new house whilst you're still living in the old house, as they say.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. Thank you, Zoe. Damien, any further thoughts from you on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was probably one of the first points that Zoe made in her presentation, which is that I think that a lot of people are quite intimidated by the issue of privacy, because they see it as being this very technical, very complex issue. And actually, it's not. It's about giving consumers the opportunity to consent, so that you can use their data, and also being fair and transparent about how you're going to use that data. That's what this issue is ultimately about. It is about consumer trust. It's not a technical issue. So I think that's the mistake that I see, and I think because people view it as being a very complex issue, there's a reluctance to tackle it. So I think that people should see it as a simple change, a change which is occurring in an industry which is evolving anyway, which they need to be on top of, so that they can make the right changes to be prepared for a world which will look different in the future.
Cool. So taking that as that, businesses need to get moving on things, and they're not taking it potentially as seriously as they could do. We said we cut through the noise today of privacy. What when it comes down to it, the nuts and bolts, what are those biggest implications for business if they don't start acting now?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, Zoe went through them in the presentation. It's really, specifically from an advertising point of view, it's those four areas. It's firstly that your collected first-party data becomes even more important, because you're going to have less of the third-party cookie data available to you. It means that measurement models, you're going to have less data, less recorded data, less observed data to look at from a measurement perspective, which means businesses will be more reliant on modeling their data, so working from a smaller sample than they currently would. So they need to be bringing in platforms that enable them to be able to do that. It will put limitations on some targeting options, specifically things like sequential messaging and frequency capping, and then some restrictions on marketers' ability to be able to personalize, depending on how reliant they are on third-party cookies to currently personalize their experience.
I feel like Damien and I keep flip-flopping good cop, bad cop rules about tech and people. I guess to counter his point on this question, the only thing I think that's left out is what Zach brought up, is that this is a key differentiator, and customers are more aware, and they are looking to find out what brands are actually making changes. And there are, you see reports in the news of people complaining about privacy policies being copied and pasted without actually being read through, and the terms and conditions have nothing to do with the business that they're applied to. So I do think awareness is just going to continue to increase. We're really the tip of the iceberg right now, and how you act in this time will set a tone and set a precedent, and either make customers flock to your brand or be wary of engaging with it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you there, Zoe. I think we'll start seeing a bigger difference, certainly in the digital ecosystem, over the next year and really decade. This is going to take a while, but those brands that get out there first, it's going to be much clearer. If you take that wedding ring example, you will see a big difference between those brands that are actually taking on board the privacy experience and actually thinking about trust and transparency, and those brands that aren't. Because those brands that aren't, the experience for consumers is going to be talk to my lawyer before you enter my website, because of a lack of transparency. And so I think we'll start seeing a big difference over the next few years.
Cool. Zach, in your presentation, you called out Apple as a business, and I like the term you used, that they are using trust as a differentiator. A question has come through from Matilda, which kind of links to that. You know, besides from Apple, have you seen any brands who you think are getting privacy right at the moment?
Weirdly, I mentioned Lego earlier in my presentation, but probably in the wrong way. But Lego are starting to push the boat out, and they're doing much better about how they communicate things like their cookie banner. So if you go and have a look at the Lego cookie banner, the language, it doesn't look like a lawyer's written it. It's language that is relevant to a consumer, that talks to the value to the consumer of allowing that cookie, not the value to Lego. And I think, you know, those pieces, the BBC does a great job as well. Actually, Channel 4, if you look at the BBC's privacy policy, Channel 4 has 4OD, their sign up at the moment is really good. When you're entering in personal information, it tells you why they're asking for that personal information. So I think that, I mean, there's some that I've certainly seen, but it's all about the wording that they use and having that human element.
And not hiding behind contracts, really, not hiding behind legal talk, right? It's making it real for people.
Could you imagine putting a lawyer in front of your store and asking someone to sign a disclaimer before they walk through the doors? It would never happen. No. In a million years. So why do we accept it? Why have we got ourselves into this place in the digital ecosystem?
I'm really glad Zach surfaced that part about having it in layman's terms or in approachable, human, understandable language, because the idea here really is to build trust with customers. And the only way to do that is by being transparent and not hiding behind that language that really nobody wants to read. Nobody's going to invest the time to find out what it is. So I think, to his point, if we make this truly something, there's an educational piece that I think is missing to this, right? I think customers are willing to make the trade of information for value, and there's a lack of understanding in what all of this tracking accomplishes. So I think there has been an abuse in terms of people collecting way too much data, holding on to it for too long for no reason, having too much personally identifiable information. But the data that is used for specific business activations or use cases or retargeting or things that are very, very helpful in the day-to-day life, if there was some deeper understanding, and unfortunately the onus is a bit on brands and marketers to do this for clientele, but more understanding of what actually you get in exchange for your data, I think more people would be much more willing. And to do that, you have to approach it in a way that is more human and less legal.
Yeah, I find the concept of a value exchange really interesting, because at the moment the value exchange, which I think most people are thinking about offering, is you give us your data and we provide you with a better overall experience. And of course that's some value exchange, but I also think that maybe businesses aren't being realistic with themselves around, is that enough, you know, to incentivize a customer to give you access to valuable data. So I think businesses need to think about more than just the personalized experience when it comes to that value exchange. They do need to think about exclusive promotions, even offering things like free fulfillment to people that are prepared to give them their data. So I think that is a really important thing for all businesses to think about, is creating that value exchange, and almost going back to the days of the old-fashioned loyalty schemes, where you would have a loyalty card for some of your favorite stores, and based on that loyalty card and sharing some of your data with the business, you'd build up points and you'd get some sort of value, some sort of promotion in exchange for that.
Just building on that and going on a slight side topic of, it's often been talked about these independent platforms that will, you know, monetize that value exchange for individuals, right? And I think there was a very well publicized one on a BBC Dragon's Den episode not so long ago. Do you see that as a realistic thing that could come through in the future? I mean, have you seen many instances of it, or?
I haven't seen. I mean, I think historically, absolutely right. You can think about those. You can think about all of the loyalty schemes that used to be commonplace in the past, and that was about creating a value exchange between the consumer and the business. So I think that if you look back, that those value exchange have existed historically. I think with more subscription type models coming in for retailers. I think that's a platform to collect data and to give people a better, better value for the data that they're sharing with you.
I think that Damien's point, it's existed. It's just been more heavily skewed towards the benefit of the business or the brand, right? It was much more of a one-sided value exchange. There was some like nominal or like a sprinkle of here you get this and we get this, and I think the main point that we're all trying to drive forward in this discussion is basically if it's more of a symbiotic relationship where both sides are winning, the business will benefit more and even greater. And that's why I was saying before, I don't think that privacy and performance are antithetical or that they're not complementary. I think by enhancing your privacy, you can increase your performance as well. And right now it's just being viewed in the negative, like, oh, all of these targeting tactics that we've relied on for so long are being taken away from us. But there's this whole plethora of other ones that will bring in deeper insights and better connectivity and more loyalty and engagement from your customers. And it just requires a bit of effort and a bit of give and take.
Cool. Incredibly positive spin on that one, Zoe. I think, linking the performance side of things in as well is fantastic. Just looking at some of the questions that are starting to come through. Jim, thank you very much for posting your question. Quite a technical question. I don't know if this is one that anyone feels like taking on, but we were talking about transparency, and Jim calls out the principles of transparency and how these apply to increasing move to server-side solutions for tagging across GTM and Facebook. Does anyone feel comfortable talking about that one now?
I'm happy to give it a pop. I think there's no issue with some of these solutions. Another one is like Google Customer Match, and this is all about where you're wanting to target individuals on different platforms, similar with the conversion API for Facebook that's been listed there. Now, how it's deployed, whether that's server side or front end side with JavaScript or cookies or local storage, it doesn't really matter. The premise still remains the same, though, that it needs to be done in a privacy centric manner. Now, the difference with the conversion APIs and customer match is that you're passing personal data directly to those third parties. And right now, those third parties are saying, hey, if you read our terms and conditions, you need to make sure you've got consent to pass that information. But they're not checking. It's an honor system. It's if you're passing that data to us, we've told you that you need to be compliant in passing it, but we're not going to check. And I think what we'll probably see is the introduction of those checks where we'll have to start proving that we actually have that valid record of receipt from the consumer where we're relying on consent to pass that information over. So I don't think it's necessarily the technology being used. I think the premise remains the same, and we'll probably see increased requirements from that perspective on those.
Cool. Thank you very much, Zach, for tackling that one. Mustafa has also joined. Thank you very much for your question. He asked, what are the success factors in first-party relationships? So with regards to that, just in terms of context, I don't know if we're talking to potential KPIs that we could use to look at first-party relationships potentially. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can definitely sense check whether you're creating that value proposition by looking at the percentage of people which are opting in. I think that actually just having a KPI which is around collecting data itself, which is usable, is important. And you probably also need to have some sort of KPI around the activation as well. It's all good collecting and storing your data in an effective way, but are you actually able to activate it? And then do you actually get value from those activities? I think that if businesses are having to give away more to be able to collect data, then it's going to become much more important for them to be able to put a tangible value against the data-driven activities that they're running.
I think you touched on a nice point there, David. I think we're coming, probably part of the problem, we're coming out of a world where we've been trying to collect as much data or been told we've got to collect data for Lord knows how long, but it's often just been sat there and not used from that perspective. So it's a good idea, some KPIs there. Changing tack slightly, looking at this at a global level, because this is a global webinar, and we've talked about the fact that, you know, consumers are changing. We operate across global markets, but regulations aren't global. How should business respond to this kind of challenge? Zach, have you got any thoughts on that from a global perspective?
I mean, this is it is a tough challenge. It is a moving target for sure. Just recently we've had Virginia, Colorado follow suit with California, Colorado taking it a little bit further, in fact, and also allowing opting out of consumer profiling. So yes, you need to stay abreast, and I think this is where your DPO is your best friend. You can't be expected, if you're a marketer or if you're working in revenue generation piece, to know all of this. That's what your DPO is there for. So lean on your privacy office to support with impacts specific to your functions. And if your function is caring about the consumer, then just give that clarity to them. There's also loaded, like even just having things like Google Alerts. I've probably got far too many of them now, but Google Alerts, partners, of course, I'm going to say partners, partner with One Trust Preference Choice will do it all for you. It's going to be in the system. You won't have to worry. But I think, internally as a business, work with your internal teams. There will definitely be people there to support you.
I just saw Amy's comment come through, which I'm glad she said, because most brands don't have a DPO, honestly, is what I've found. So in that case, in my mind, you work towards the most stringent regulation. So this is ever evolving, ever changing, but whoever is setting the goalpost the farthest, try to align with them. So right now, that would probably be GDPR as the most stringent. It doesn't really matter where in the world you are. It's such a global economy at this point that you definitely have consumers, shoppers, users coming from different regions that are not your own. So you cannot just abide by your own local, regional, national regulations. You kind of need to get to the ultimate regulatory perspective where you're operating from a privacy safe environment. And even if that means you're going a bit above and beyond, it'll just save you some catch up time in the future.
So set the bar high, go for the gold standard.
Yeah.
Excellent. And Kit comes in with a question. Thank you for joining, Kit. In a cookieless world void of unique identifiers, how will we be able to accurately keep track on customers who are consented or not consented? I imagine, Zach, that's just one straight in your ballpark, right? That's a question directed straight at you.
I mean, it's a good question. But the way to answer this question is to put it back to you, Kit, and say, what consent would you want to capture? What would you be capturing consent for, where you don't have a hidden identifier that the consumer doesn't know about? Does that make sense? So if in order to capture consent from an individual, they must be consenting to something. And so if they're not willing to provide an identifier themselves, then what could you possibly be asking for that's trustworthy or transparent or compliant use of data where you would need consent without their knowledge effectively?
Spot on, Zach. Thank you. Just very aware of time. We've sped through there. I've only got a few moments left. So my penultimate question was going to be, based on today's conversations, what are the essential and practical steps that people that are watching the webinar today can take their business back to their business to ensure that they're on the right track where privacy is concerned? And Damien, I'll come to you first.
So sorry, literally as you were asking that, my connection went down.
So I'll go. I was asking from for everybody watching today, what are the essential and practical steps that you can take back into your business to make sure that you're on the right track?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing for the vast majority of businesses is going to be to make sure that this is a topic which is on the table, which is actually being discussed. I think for many businesses, it's one which just continues to be put on the back burner. I think it's important that people who are working in digital make sure that it's front of mind in the businesses that they work in. I think this is the perfect platform for businesses to get their house in order when it comes to first-party data, and in fact, when it comes to their data-driven strategies. My personal opinion is that the marketing industry is an industry that talks about data-driven strategies all the time, but actually very few data-driven strategies are actually good. Very, very few of them are effective. So this is a perfect opportunity for people to use this as a platform to get their first-party data in order. That means collecting the right information, storing it in the right way, and making sure that you're activating it with activities that, rather than chasing around customers that we're going to convert anyway and potentially upsetting and annoying customers, thinking about how you can use that data to really complement the customer experience. So I think that, what I would say is put it on the table and use it as a platform to really start talking about getting your first party data strategy in order. Cool.
Thank you, Damien. Zoe, so what do you think of the immediate practical steps that people should be taking back?
I think Damien covered most of them. I would harken back to what I said. I think having a mapping or a visualization, I find every time we engage with a customer and I say, what's your architecture like, or what tech tools do you, it requires stakeholders from all different areas of the business. There isn't a singular mapping. And so, as Damien said, this is really an opportunity to review both your digital media and your measurement tactics and figure out what percentage of the tactics and the measurement I have right now will translate into the future. And for the portion that doesn't, how can I find a workaround for that? Or what can I be doing? So what part of your media spend is relying upon third-party cookies? And how can you start testing different tactics to find out how you can replace those third-party cookie tactics? But essentially, as Damien said, it's getting all the stakeholders together, having everybody care about this and recognize it's important, it's evolving, it's not going away, and it does require cohesive effort. And then really digging into the truth of how you're operating currently and what will need to shift.
Cool, thank you, Zoe. Zach, I'm throwing you the curveball, the last one to go on that one, but I mean, Zoe's already called out your kind of mapping slide. Is there anything further you'd add on that? Or?
No, that's right. I was the lucky one. I had the most time to think about it. So I think, making it a thing, caring about it, to Zoe and Damien's point is the most important thing as a starting point. And it can be as simple as just setting up some starting guiding principles. I did a webinar a few months back with Harry Decker, who's the media director at Unilever. And he said there were 2 questions that he gave to all his teams. There was, if there was anything to do with data or the consumer, you answer these 2 questions first. And if you can't answer them, don't spend any time on it. The first one being, would I do this with my mother's data? The second one being, how would I explain this to the 9 o'clock news? And I think that's a really nice, simple way of getting people to start caring and thinking about it in their day-to-day decisions today. You don't have to do everything overnight, but that can get everyone rallied and start thinking about it today in all of the decisions they're making.
Lovely. That's brilliant, Zach. I think that will definitely appear in the write-up, that one. So thank you for sharing those 2 questions with us. And just to round off, one final question. And you've all been incredibly positive and enthusiastic today, so I'm expecting positive and enthusiastic answers to the final question. It is, casting our eyes forward 5 years, what do you think the landscape of, marketing will look like given all these changes around privacy? Or would you hope it to look like?
There'd be fewer annoying ads.
That'll be a great start.
Mic drop, that's it.
Sorry, go ahead, sorry.
Zach, why don't you go ahead? I'll have time to think of a meaningful positive.
I think, just treating the digital ecosystem as we treat the real world. It's probably very belligerent to say that marketing today, how the ad tech ecosystem works, what we do with customers' data behind their back is no different to the same thing that trolls are doing in social media. It's not treating the other person as a human being. And I think, in 5 years, I'd like to see that there's no way you eradicate it, but we see much greater movement towards that.
Lovely. Thank you, Zach. Zoe.
I almost don't want to add to that because it was so perfect, but I would definitely agree. I would love for it to be more human-centered and less about bottom line profit, right? Achieving that bottom line target, but via tactics that people don't. I think a lot of people view the digital marketing industry as like corrupt or covert or sly, or there's all these like very negative connotations associated. Like we're the devil. We're just like stealing everyone's data and selling it and making a profit. And I would like to see that shifted. And I think this opens the door for that potentially if it's managed correctly.
Yeah, I remember when I first started working in digital marketing about 14 years ago, I would get into a taxi and somebody would ask me, what I did for a living, and I'd say digital marketing, and they'd be like, "Oh, that's really cool. You do the advertising on Google and Facebook." And now you say I work in digital advertising, and they're like, "Oh, you lot." Yeah, I mean, I think the important thing to remember with all of this is obviously we naturally look at this from a marketing lens perspective, but I do think there's a much bigger picture to all of this. Data and scaled data is really important to the future of being able to do very, very important things. It will help us to solve climate change. It will greatly improve healthcare. I mean, being able to use data effectively will help people to live longer by being able to diagnose diseases much earlier. It will help with education. It will help with all sorts of issues which the world will inevitably face over the coming decades. So I think that marketing's a small part of it, but the really important role that marketers play is that we unfortunately, or our industry unfortunately, has played a role in hindering consumer trust in giving people their data. And so I think that it's marketing's responsibility to work really hard to rebuild consumer trust. And that really means making sure that we're completely transparent with consumers about how we're using their data and then using that data fairly. So I think it's absolutely crucial. I do think marketing has an important role to play in rebuilding consumer confidence.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I think it's time that we brought things to the webinar to an end. Thank you so much, Zach, Zoe, and Damien for joining today. It's been a pleasure to speak with you all. Had some great ideas. Brilliant to hear you all speak so passionately and inspiring about something which, if we're being honest, can sometimes be a dry topic. I don't think anyone will step away from this webinar saying that. It's been great to hear you present and hear your thoughts. Thank you so much. Everybody that's joined us today, thank you for engaging. Thanks for your questions. We hope to see you again sometime soon. Feel free to reach out to us all if you've got any further questions, and keep your eyes peeled for the write-up for this on our website and also for future webinars. But for now, I'll say goodbye to you all, and thanks for coming. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, James. Bye, everyone.